Good afternoon. National Teachers Association is proud to sponsor this next breakout author. We feel like she is really a lifelong learner and a true teacher at heart. And we are glad that she's here with us today. So please help me welcome Diane Gabaldon.
Well, thank you for coming today. And I have heard probably more attempts on my name this weekend than it's usually pronounced Gabaldon. Rhymes with band the bone, that's how you remember it. Reminds me of my days as a university professor, which is what I did before I quit to write novels. But I was a research professor, but they borrowed me periodically to teach classes when someone was on sabbatical. And what I usually taught was human anatomy and physiology. That was a very popular class because people assumed it would be easy. For that same reason, the football team always took it as well. Right? And the football team would all be in the front row, sound asleep. And I would walk up to the edge of the platform and say, well, this morning, gentlemen, we're going to discuss the history of contraception. And they'd all start blinking. I'd say, in days of old, when nights were bold, and condoms not invented, they wrapped old socks around their cocks and babies were prevented. Anyway, one of the first questions I get asked usually is, well, you have all these advanced degrees, and how did you get from being a scientist to being a novelist? Because people think that science is this, cold, orderly, white-coated, tidy, anal kind of thing. And being a writer, of course, is this wonderfully creative and free and funny and woolly kind of thing, and that's not actually true. I mean, art and science are just two sides of the same coin. What they both rest on is the ability to see patterns and pull patterns out of chaos. It's just if you're doing science, you're looking at the natural world and, looking at what chaos you see in front of you, and then carefully defining a piece of it and saying, well, I think this is what's going on here. And then you develop a hypothesis that says, I think this is why this is going on here. How would I test this? And then you design an experiment and you get a little further in your knowledge. Either you were right or you were wrong, and either way you learn something. That's pretty much the same thing when you write a book or paint a picture or do a symphony. Anything like that, you are using your own internal chaos to draw patterns out of your own experience, your own perceptions of the world, what you draw from the things around you. And you kind of define it in terms of what you're doing. If you're writing a novel, your definition is much broader than if you're writing a poem. But it's still coming from the same source. And your work of art is your hypothesis. You're saying, I think this is how things work. And you build something that exemplifies that. And then your experiment is when you loose it on the public and see if you were right or wrong. So that your presence here is validation for my experimental approach. How I actually got from being a scientist to being a writer is that I always was a writer. I've known from about the age of 8 that I was supposed to be a novelist, but I came from a very conservative family background. And my father was fond of saying to me, you're such a poor judge of character, you're bound to marry some bum. So be sure you get a good education so you can support your family. So with this going on at home, I thought perhaps I would not mention that I wanted to be a novelist, since even at that tender age I realized that this was kind of a financially iffy proposition. And so I went into science. I liked science, I was good at it, but I knew I was supposed to be a writer. I did not marry a bum, I married a very nice and successful man, but he did quit work 3 months after our first child was born in order to start his own business. And while that eventually succeeded very well, for a while there I was our sole support. And they don't pay assistant research professors very much. So we got to a point where I really needed to make a little extra money. I had developed this rather odd expertise in scientific computation. All I will say about that is that it's really easy to be an expert if there's only 6 people in the world who do what you do, which was my position at the time. And I didn't know how to write. So I sent a query letter to Byte and InfoWorld and PC World and all of the computer magazines, including with it a copy of a magazine that I had started at my university called Science Software Quarterly, which was for scientists who used computers. This was the early 1980s when microcomputers and personal computers, they were just barely beginning to creep into universities and laboratories. And so I sent my journal off, along with a comic book that I'd written for Walt Disney's educational media, titled Nutrition Adventures with Orange Bird. Said, dear sirs, as you can see from the enclosed, you won't find anyone who knows more about scientific and technical software than I do, and at the same time can write so as to appeal to a broad popular audience. Well, this got immediate results, and within a year I was making as much freelancing for the computer press as I was being a university professor, which, as I said, just goes to show how little they pay university professors. But we also went on having children, so at the time when I decided that it was the right time to write a novel, I had 2 full-time jobs and 3 children under the age of 6. I was always saying to people at this point, I don't want any of you who want to be writers telling me you don't have time. The thing is that people who want to be writers, they think, well, I just have a room of my own and 8 hours during which nobody bothers me. I'll tell you what, nobody has that anytime. There's always something that you need to be doing other than writing. But the other thing is that you don't actually need 8 hours, and in fact, I could not physically write for 8 hours if I had it, except at the very end of a book when I'm completely out of my mind and just plugged into the book with both hands. Prior to that, I probably write 2 to 3 hours a day, and that's about as much as I can write effectively. It's hard work, and also you have to remain concentrated, and most people can't concentrate that effectively for that long. So it's, in essence, to write, you need a few minutes. You just have to keep coming back to it. I was having a conversation with Rick Rankin, the actor who plays Roger. The first time I met him, he was fascinated by what I did. I was, of course, quite interested in what he did. But he was asking me, he said, I want to write something, how would I go about it? I'm so busy in doing this and this. And I told him, I said, you got 10 minutes a day. I said, you could hold your breath for 10 minutes probably if you tried. But, take 10 minutes, sit down and write. Don't think about it, just put words on paper about anything that comes to your mind. So the next day, come back and do it again for another 10 minutes. Your back of your brain will have been thinking during that period in between, so your second 10 minutes will actually have something in them that you write. But, stop at the end of 10 minutes the next day, come back and do it again. So within a month, you will be writing, half an hour at a time. Within 6 months, you'll be writing an hour or, whatever time you can scrounge out of your schedule. But you will have some idea where you're going and what you want to say. But, the thing is, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So don't worry if you aren't good to start. I mean, nobody's good to start. We say ballerinas are born on their toes, you've got to work. Even if you are talented, and even if you are lucky, which is just about as important, you still have to work at it. But, it's just like exercise. Start by walking to the end of your block. You don't have to get out and sprint 5 miles if you haven't moved in 3 years. Work with what you've got, basically. And that's you work with your brain as well with what you've got. If you want to write, the most important thing is, besides showing up on time, is just to understand how your own brain works and work with it. As if any of you, and I'd say most of you did, go through the public school system, almost invariably you were taught to write in a very linear manner. We must have a topic sentence, we must have a topic paragraph, we must have an outline, Roman numeral 1, subhead A, subhead B, subhead C, Roman numeral 2, etc. And I get a lot of people at writers' conferences say, well, I really want to write, and I have all kinds of ideas, but, I just can't write an outline. I say, good, no problem. It's just that you belong to the half of humanity that does not think in a linear fashion. Okay, now there's nothing wrong or immoral about thinking in a linear fashion. It's just that I don't, and neither do a lot of other people that I know, and yet we write books. You can do it. You just need to know how your own brain works. For me, what I need to work on any given day is what I call a kernel. It's a very vivid image, a line of dialogue, an emotional ambiance, anything that I can sense or see concretely. And I'll sit back and write a line describing whatever it is. And I sit there and stare at it. I take words out, and I put words back, and I move the clauses around. And that's the pure craftsmanship part, is making the sentence, as euphonious and elegant and clear as it can be. Because, that's work, it's craftsmanship. So the front of my mind is doing that. The back of my mind is busy, asking questions that I don't even hear, like what time of day is it? How is the light falling? Are your fingers cold? Yes, they are. The room must be cold. Is there a fire in the room? My feet are warm. Yes, the fire's over there. There's a dog by the fire. I haven't seen him before. Yeah, that's right. And so gradually, the back of my mind fills up enough steam that it's pushing through to the front, and then I can write another line or two. This means that I write very slowly, but I write very thoroughly. Now, for some people, it works, you just rip through, put everything in your mind out on the paper, and then you go back and disentangle the parts that are good. Okay, I could not do that to save my life. So the important thing is, figure out what works for you. Anything that gets words on the page is the right thing to do.